Hey, Jason Moore here, and I am really excited to be on the Headsmack podcast.
You are listening to Conversations with Misfits, Mavericks, and Trailblazers.
Hey, welcome to the Headsmack podcast. My name is Paul Pavolny, and I am excited to have another misfit with me, Jason Moore. He is the author of AI and the Church. He's a creative consultant, speaker, trainer specializing in hybrid worship, guest readiness, and AI integration with over 20 years of ministry expertise. Jason, welcome, man.
It is good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I've had several conversations with AI gurus and experts, and always fascinating. And with AI being such a hot topic, always evolving. One update from one of the AI giants, and suddenly everything changes and gets better and better. And, the whole 5 fingers and warped faces that we had just a short time ago.
Yes.
Is no longer a challenge, and now we're getting stuff that is truly amazing. So I'm looking forward to talking about AI with you. But before we go there, I'm a fan of superheroes. I love hearing origin stories. And so I want to start with your origin story. What is the origin of Jason Moore? And you can go as far back as you want to kind of let me know a little bit about you that led you to where you're at now.
Absolutely. Well, I am going to go way back just to say that when I was in about 3rd grade, believe it or not, I had this dream of becoming an artist when I grew up. I didn't know exactly what that meant. I thought maybe I'd be a cartoonist or, draw pictures for a living or whatever. And so as a kid, I did like to draw all the time. A lot of people would ask me to draw pictures for them. And then when I got a little older, I got commissioned to do various portraits and things. So I can draw fairly photorealistic and that kind of thing. And then I had a dream to go to art school and become a commercial artist. And while I was in art school, a large mega church in my area needed some design work done. And that ended up turning into an internship. And while I was in college, I started working pretty regularly for this church, and they were doing a national search for an art director. And they said, well, we're going to interview you as well. And they were like flying people in from all over the country, and decided to give me the job as a fresh out of college student. And so God sort of got a hold of my career at that point. I wanted to move to Hollywood and make movies and that kind of thing. That was another part of my dream as a kid. So
now, were your parents creative? Where did that creativity come from?
Not really. My dad was a machinist. He was a mold maker, and my mom was a nurse. Mm-hmm. But they certainly encouraged my creativity. They pretty much, if they saw that I had an interest in something, they supported it full on. Oddly enough, I did, grow up in a Christian household and that sort of thing. But when I was in art school, the director of my school came to me when he found out that I was going to take a job at a church, and he tried to talk me out of it. And he was like, "You're too talented to waste your talent in the church."
Oh, wow.
And my parents, they didn't discourage me from working in the church, but there was almost this like, well, gosh, your dream was to go work in Hollywood and that kind of thing. So they didn't say don't.
Settling, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't say don't do it, but it, I eventually decided that was the route I was going to go, and I gave up sort of the Hollywood dream. I've gotten to dabble. I've gotten to do a little bit here and there with some friends in Hollywood and some productions and stuff like that. But
now there is a difference between being an artist, drawing pictures and things like that, and being a designer. How was that transition? Was it easy for you? Was it something new? Was it revelatory? What was that like?
It was sort of all those things. It scared me, quite honestly, which will sort of preface what this AI conversation looks like. But I was really afraid when I went to art school that, you're right, I was a traditional artist. I was not a designer. And then when I went to art school, of course, they want to put you in front of a computer and they talk to you about programs like Photoshop and Illustrator. And I was really afraid I was going to lose my skills as an artist that could draw and paint and do those sorts of things. What I eventually figured out was that the computer was just another paintbrush. It was just another pencil. It was just another tool. And the fears eventually went away. I figured out that I could literally render out what was in my head in a different sort of, sometimes an even better way than I could with traditional tools. And I kind of had that same experience with AI, where it really kind of scared me when I first saw that you could use words to prompt images. And I thought, oh, did I just witness my extinction here?
Right.
And then I kind of figured out that, no, this is just a way more sophisticated toolbox that I can play in. And there's still artistry and creativity and all that kind of stuff involved. So, but real quick, back to the origin story. I went to be on staff at this mega church, started consulting and writing books and things like that. And eventually I felt like my call was not to serve one local church, but kind of the global church in a sense. And so I stepped away from there to start some ministries to resource churches around creativity and media and image. I spent the first 20 years of my career really trying to convince churches that technology was okay and that screens
Right.
in worship spaces could enhance the experience of worship for a very visual and creative culture. And so that's sort of been my bent for all these years. And how do we communicate our message in a way that is full of artistry and imagery and creativity and all those things.
And so now you're full-time in the consulting. That's what you're doing now.
I have been in 2002, I started my ministry. I co-founded my company, Midnight Oil Productions. I do about 30 to 40 speaking engagements every year. I do a lot of consultation work. I have a few different areas that I focus on, one of which is hospitality. So a lot of churches bring me in as a secret worshiper, which is sort of like being a secret shopper, except you don't buy anything.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of like a professional church visitor, and I share all of my impressions, the things that I'm learning, the things that where they missed it, that kind of stuff. I'll write a big report. So that's one of the things I help churches with, kind of collaborative worship design. So how does a pastor and a musician and an artist and various other people work together to create an experience where from the beginning to the end, you're telling one big idea, one big story, and you're doing that in all of those different ways. Kind of the idea of a narrative worship experience, or where there's one thread that kind of goes throughout all of the elements. So I do some of that. And then I'm also a media producer, a graphic designer, motion graphic artist. So I do a lot of kind of boutique style work where churches and organizations will hire me to do that kind of thing. And then I do work in the secular world too.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the secret shopper, the secret saint, or secret visitor, or what are some of the interesting stories or interesting experiences? Because churches can have blind spots, and
Absolutely.
they could also feel very tribe famous. That they think that they are the best thing going. They are better than everybody else. They're doing it fantastically. And so having somebody come in as a secret visitor that's untainted by the politics, untainted by the culture, and all of that, and look at it with fresh eyes is pretty awesome. So tell me some stories. What are some of the experiences that you've had in helping in that space?
Well, there are so many. It's so interesting that without meaning to, we are very, very inwardly focused. I often say that secret worshiping feels a little like, I've never done this, but it feels a little like crashing someone's family reunion, where everybody's got the shirt on and they all know each other, and they all know the secret handshakes and all those kinds of things.
Right.
And
they
you're
have their own chair that nobody else could sit in.
Yes. So there's one story that's pretty interesting. I walked into a worship service a few minutes before it was to begin, and I sat down. And I was just kind of looking at all of the stuff in front of me, the printed bulletin that they gave me when I came in. And this older lady and her husband came over, and they looked at me, and the woman said to her husband, "I guess we'll sit somewhere else this morning." And then she went and sat on the opposite side of the pew and just scowled at me the entire service, like I sat in her seat, which was kind of uncomfortable. I got to share that feedback with the team that brought me in. Another time,
were they surprised, or were they like, you shouldn't have touched Sister Betty's chair. We should have warned you about it.
When I described what happened, they immediately knew who it was. And they're like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, okay. So they had to, I said, I think you have to have a gentle conversation with her to let her know that like that is very off-putting. Like if you hadn't paid me to be here today, I certainly wouldn't have come. I wouldn't come back because
Right, right.
that was very uncomfortable. I was sharing that one time at a training, and this woman told me a story about how she went to sit down at a church and someone said, oh, excuse me, that's my seat. And she said, okay, I'm sorry. So she got up and moved somewhere else, was just getting ready to sit down. And this family came in. They're like, oh, excuse me, ma'am, that's where we sit.
Oh,
And she said,
wow.
I wasn't going to give it a third shot. So I went and I stood by the back door or the entryway into the worship space. And this guy comes over to me and says, excuse me, this is where I stand. And it was an usher. And she's like, there was nowhere I could sit or stand in this church.
Oh, wow.
She said, I just went and got in my car and went home. And then one other story that is pretty unbelievable. I was at a church in Waterloo, Iowa, and I walked into the building, and this greeter was there, and she said, you have a strange face. And I was like, I do? I'm like, well, and she's like, I just mean, I don't recognize you. I'm like, I like the sound of that better than you have a strange face.
Oh, wow.
So the things that we say to people could really kind of shape their entire experience with us. And I'm trying to help people see themselves from an outsider's perspective. I talk about the idea, and you've probably heard the phrase nose blind, when you go nose blind to something, like you can't smell it anymore.
Right,
So
right.
like I built the home that I live in back in 2014, and that sounds fancier than it is. There's like 20 houses in my neighborhood that look exactly the same, but have different colored shutters or whatever.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, when you'd come into the house, you'd kind of smell that new house smell. And eventually we couldn't smell it anymore. But when we'd go on vacation for a couple of weeks, you'd come home and you'd open the door and it's like, there's new house smell. And you could smell it for maybe 10 minutes and then it was gone. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that many churches have gone nose blind to what it's like to experience their what they do for an outsider who doesn't know what they're supposed to say when. They don't know those secret handshakes that we have where everybody does this thing at this time, or the signage is often very poor. We don't know where to take our kids. There are all sorts of different things that we don't mean to, but we're inwardly focused and we kind of lose sight of what an outsider would experience.
Right. So how far back from the experience do you start evaluating, and what are some of the things that you look at for the person that listens to this that's maybe in ministry or on a church team or even the pastor?
Mm-hmm.
How far back in your experience of evaluating do you start, and what are some of the things that you start looking for?
So I try really hard not to get overly invested ahead of time because I want to experience it the way a guest would experience it. So usually when a church asks me to come do this, I do it both in person and I do it online. I'm usually at least 3 months out, but sometimes as much as maybe a year out, where I'm going to come and do a visit. What I try to do in that time is know enough to know where I'm supposed to go and when I'm supposed to go there, but I try not to dig deep into kind of who they are. What I'll do the night before in my hotel room most of the time is I will do kind of an evaluation of the website from an outsider's perspective. Like, do I know what time and where to go and who these people are? I talk a lot about the idea of moving our hospitality from what I would call transactional to relational. We don't mean to be, but sometimes we're very transactional in the way that we present who we are. When someone walks in the door, if you hand them a piece of paper, you might call that a bulletin or a worship folder or a prompt or whatever the language is in your church. Just simply handing someone a piece of paper is a transaction.
Right.
But having a conversation with them and saying, oh, by the way, this will help you through your experience this morning is a relational approach. Even many churches will give out a first-time guest gift or first-time visitor gift or whatever. Sometimes that can be a complete transaction where it's like, pick one up on your way out or stop by the welcome center and
Right.
you'll find them there. It's like the whole purpose of that is that you are trying to build a relationship with someone. So don't hand them a mug and that be it or whatever. You really need to have a conversation. And I do a whole thing on, I'm not a big fan of white ceramic church coffee mugs with one color logos on them, because I think people
Yeah.
sniff out that you spent as little as possible. But it's all about making good first impressions.
Yeah, I think where you started there talking about the website, I've seen so many church websites that fail in the basics, like
Yeah.
how easy is it to find the church times, like when church starts, how easy is it to find the address, and how easy is it to find a picture of somebody that goes to the church or a staff member. Like
Yes.
I've visited church, I do church sites and stuff. And I've visited church sites, and it's like I can't find a picture of anybody on staff. I can't find easily your church times. I've got to drill down menus and click on stuff here and click on stuff there, and your
Yeah.
address isn't clear. And for me, like those three are the basics. And maybe, about you and what you believe, because
Yeah.
everybody kind of has their preferences of, where they lean, doctrinally and stuff. And so they want to find somebody that aligns with that. What are some of the other things that you look for?
Well, some of my kind of boilerplate, like this is what you always should do. I talk about having the times be above the fold, high on the page,
Mhm.
and location information. Um, I remind churches all the time that post-COVID, you're all multi-site churches now because you have a physical location and a digital location. I shouldn't have to dig all over the place to find where you stream your worship online. A lot of people will transition from being an online worshiper to an in-person worshiper if you do a good job of creating an experience where they're not simply spectators or observers. So
Right.
those are two things. Here's one that's really, I think a lot of people miss this, but we don't do a good job of describing the worship that we offer, or we'll use really simple terms like traditional worship or contemporary or modern worship. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
You have an idea in your head of what that means, but for me, it might mean something completely different. So I really encourage churches to create a robust description of what it is that you offer. And then when I see, worship is at 9 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. or whatever, to have the whatever style of worship that is clickable so that I can click on that and find out what you mean when you say traditional worship, which
Right.
also includes maybe giving people some suggestions on how to dress. Because
Yeah.
if I show
Yeah.
up in flip-flops and a t-shirt and everybody else is wearing suits and ties and dresses, and I'm probably
Right.
going to feel a little out of place, So,
Right. Right.
and
You
then
could do
one
that
other,
with photographs too, right? You
yeah,
can show, if you're like there are some churches that raise their hands, others that don't. And so if you're
yes,
a hand raiser and you go to a church where they don't,
yeah,
you're gonna feel a little out of place. So even sometimes photographs can communicate that too.
you're so right. And I always encourage the churches I'm working with to avoid the overuse of stock photos. I want to see
Right.
what your
Right.
people look like, what your
Yeah.
worship looks like. I don't need like the stock photos that look like their elevation church, which has smoke machines and lights, and then I
Right.
come to your
Right.
church and it doesn't look anything
And it's a
like
little
that. So
storefront. Yeah.
yeah. And then the other thing, and you kind of touched on this too, the pictures of the people, not only in the congregation, but the staff. Like I think
Yeah.
a robust staff or team section is where we really can start relationship development. So
Right.
I always encourage four things. Photos that are consistent, because I have gone to church websites where it's like the pastor has a really professional headshot, and then like the musician or whatever has some selfie from a church picnic, and somebody else has their glamour shot from the mall in the 90s or whatever.
Well, they're
Uh,
up against the wall like a prisoner, just
yes, you've seen those photos. Um,
Absolutely.
so consistent photos, a way to contact each person. I mean, that's the other thing, is sometimes I'll just see like there's a general phone number, and I don't want to have to like navigate your system to figure out how am I going to actually get to the youth pastor or whatever the
Right.
case may
Right.
be. The third one, which is maybe the most important one, is what I would say I would call a vision statement. What's your vision for ministry? Not
Yeah.
your bio, like where you went to school and what degree you have is great, but tell me
Right.
why you're excited about being the pastor or the family minister at this church or whatever. I get way more excited about bringing my kids when I read a paragraph about how you are passionate about raising up children in the way of Jesus,
Right. Right.
And then the fourth one, which is sort of more optional, but I really encouraged this during COVID, was the idea of having a short little video from each team member. And I mean, that could even be shot on a smartphone, but like 30 seconds. And the reason for that is that you can capture a sense of personality on a video where you can't. I mean, we've all read text and we've read something tonally in there that's not really accurate. So those are the kind of the 4 things that I recommend that people would include in their staff or team section. And that, I think, begins the relationship even before people arrive.
I love that. Love that. Okay, so we've looked at the website. We've approached the church. I'm guessing you probably look at the drive experience, driving up.
Yes.
What that experience is like, right?
I do talk a lot about curb appeal, that it's important that your campus, and even if you're a small little country church, like, are the bushes trimmed? Did you cut the grass recently? Have the windows been washed? That's one that's a big thing. Like, sometimes it looks like you're prepared for Halloween, haunted house season, because nobody's cleaned up, or the cobwebs that are hanging out in front of the church or whatever are still there. So curb appeal. And then another thing that I always encourage churches to think about is to take your own GPS directions in. Like, first of all, on the website, your address should be hot linked to GPS coordinates. And you should have a mobile version of your website, because I don't want to have to copy and paste. I want to be able to click on the address and it takes me there. But sometimes what happens is GPS will take you to the backside of the church, or it'll tell you you've arrived before you've gotten there. You really want to drive those directions. And then everything from the parking lot into the building really does start that first impression. Signage is a huge one. We've got to have good, accurate signage that is consistent. I work with a lot of churches that have lived for many, many years, a long life. And most of those churches that have lived, 100, 150, the buildings that have lived 150 years, we have a hodgepodge of different eras. People don't take down the old signs. They just add new ones in the new part of the building. And you'll see, 20 different fonts and colors and shapes. And you should have one information system that guide people around your space. So that's always a big one that I talk about. And then a clearly marked welcome area, a welcome table, or somewhere that I can go to get information about the church that I'm visiting. I think even if you're in a place where you don't have a lot of kids, having a well-marked children's ministry space and a formal check-in, like, even if you only have a couple kids, leaving your child with somebody that you don't know can be a very trauma-inducing experience. I want to know that, like, nobody else can pick my kid up but me. So do I have a card I can fill out, or some app that I can access, and so on?
Okay, so we've talked about the web experience. We've talked about a little bit of the approach experience. Before we head off to your book, which I really want to talk about, AI in the Church, because that's a whole different experience, internally, externally, and everything else. What are some of the other big mistakes that surprise churches that they're not considering when it comes to that Sunday experience that people might have?
Yeah, I kind of talk about what I would call 3 secrets. We have secret identities. We have secret handshakes, and then we have what's the third one that's not popping into my head at the moment? Well, there's a third one. I'll think of it at some point.
Yeah, let's talk about the first.
I haven't given this presentation in a while. Well, anyway, secret identities. I mean, the first thing is that we don't think about the fact that for somebody that's brand new, they don't know who anybody is. So the folks up front really need to be doing introductions every week, from the pastor to lay leaders who are leading, reading scripture, or leading a prayer, or whatever the case may be. And I think this is really important for online worshipers. If I'm not in the building, I don't have that physical piece of paper that you give me when I come in the room that tells me who everybody is. So I think it's really important that we help people know who is leading them and in worship. The secret handshake piece is that we have all sorts of little rites and rituals that we do that outsiders don't know. I grew up in the United Methodist. Well, I grew up first in the Assemblies of God denomination, and then got invited to a United Methodist youth group, and I didn't really care so much about it being United Methodist. It was just a great youth group. And I
Yeah.
remember their weekly practice was when scripture was read at the end, the person would say the word of God for the people of God. And then everybody would say in unison, it sounded like this to me the first week, because I had no idea what they said. I'm like, what was it? And it took me like 3 or 4 visits to realize, because the response is thanks be to God. But I always joke that, on the second week, I thought they said thanks be to Todd. Is that the pastor's name? Like who's Todd? And it wasn't written down anywhere. It wasn't in a bulletin. They didn't have screens at this church, but if they did, it wouldn't have been on the screen. So what are all those little things that you say and do that you just know that when this happens, we all say this thing or whatever? My wife grew up in a Catholic family, and the one mass that I have attended was her grandmother's funeral. And I felt like a fish out of water the entire time, because they would all kneel and I'd go to kneel and they'd all stand up. And then I would stand up and they'd sit, and then I'd go to sit and they'd all stand back up. And, I just felt out of sync the entire time. So what are those rites and rituals that you do that somebody would not know if they didn't know, So don't assume that people know the drill is what I often say.
Right.
And then, little things like, where do you put those new people? Like having someone to help. Ushers don't just need to take the offering, but can help me find a seat. They know those spots where someone might tell me that I'm sitting in their seat. Or some churches that I visit, this is very awkward. The door to go into the space is sometimes at the front of the worship space, like in these older churches. So you're actually, if you walk in 2 minutes into worship, it feels like you're interrupting the worship experience. So like having people that would stand by the door that would let you know that, or signage that would help you know that this is the front of the sanctuary or the worship space, whatever you call that, and directing people to other ways to enter, all those things really matter. And then I guess the last one I would say, my wife is, she's an introvert. I'm an extrovert. And for her, it's a little taxing sometimes on a Sunday morning to participate in all of what she would call forced interaction moments, like turn to your neighbor and say, or go shake 3 hands this morning or whatever. And
well, let's hold hands together as we pray.
Yes. I went to one church that ended the service with a hug circle. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'm a new person, I don't want to hug 30 people that I don't know. And I'm likely to not come back. So to try and look at what you're doing from the outsider's perspective is really helpful. The third one is secret code language. That's the one.
Oh, yes.
Secret identity, secret handshakes, and secret code language. I knew it would pop into my head.
Yeah, it would come back.
But again, we have certain little phrases and things that we say that outsiders just, they don't know what we're talking about. And even something as simple as fill out your Connect card today. Well, if I'm new, that's a common phrase that I hear sometimes when I visit church.
Right.
What is a Connect card? And by the way, if I'm worshiping online, are you going to put that in the mail to me? Because if it's a card, that's a physical thing, right? So just our language really matters. I'll throw one last one out at you here, language-wise, and that is just to remember my most recent book before this one is called Both and Maximizing Hybrid Worship for Online and In-Person Engagement. And I talk about language really mattering. We don't want to say thank you to the people who worship online by saying, if you're watching at home today, we want them to worship at home. We don't want them to watch us worship. And so I talk about that language. They're not viewers. They are participants, only if you will invite them to participate. So can you invite them to participate in prayer by putting it in the chat? Or can you make whatever that piece of paper is that they get downloadable as a PDF document so they can participate along with the things that we're saying and doing? And, if we're going to welcome each other in the room, let's wave a welcome to those who are at home. Like, how can we make an experience where people, both physically and digitally gathered, are all a part of the experience, not just spectators and participants that are physically present?
Wow, that sounds so amazing. And there's so many, I'm sure you could probably go on for a couple of hours in just sharing all the things to consider. I mean, even to consider that a lot of times first-time visitors are probably there early, because they don't know. They don't know. And so what do you do for those people that come early? You know, do you have
Yeah.
a way to make them not feel weird? Do you have a way for them not to feel out of place that you've considered? And I think that's pretty important. Are you finding that as well, that visitors usually come early, or are they usually
Well,
late? Or
I find, I think that does happen some. I find, though, that most visitors want to remain anonymous, so they'll slip in at the last moment. And one of the things that I often will talk about in my consulting is that you want to have your greeters in place 5 or 10 minutes into the service, so that when somebody does slip in at the last minute, you still have someone to open the door for them, to welcome them,
right,
to answer any questions. I'll tell you another pet peeve practice of mine that I've been seeing more often than not recently is that people will try to get some bonus time in before the service starts to do things like announcements or whatever. So the posted time might be, say, 10 a.m., but I walk in at 10 a.m. and there's already somebody on stage and they're giving some announcements or they're talking. And I look at my watch, I'm like, am I late or what? When you do that, you really kind of prevent any opportunity for conversation with a new person. So if I'm brand new and I walk in and you've started 2 minutes before the posted start time, nobody can welcome me, say good morning, because they feel like they're interrupting a service that's already in progress.
right.
I just always tell people, don't start late and don't start early. Start on time, because it's disconcerting for a guest to feel like I'm interrupting something that already started.
Right. And I think you've brought up some interesting things about, you know, culture and the way things happen within a church service. And certainly you don't have to remove those things or stop a lot of things, but make sure you communicate for that person that maybe is visiting for the first time, that doesn't understand the language, doesn't understand the cues, doesn't understand the way things happen, that you are not over explaining, but you're at least informing them of, this is what we're doing now. Hey, if fill out your connection card in the seat pocket in front of you,
Yes.
you know, things like that. You don't have to necessarily become generic and change everything about your culture, but just inform people in a way that makes sense and makes it a little clearer for them so they don't feel so lost, right?
I agree. Yeah, 100% with what you're saying. We don't want to remove our rituals. We just need to explain them in a way that people can participate and understand. I'll give you one quick example. A few years ago, I did a trip to a church in Charlotte, a very well-known church called Transformation Church, Pastor Derwin Gray. Everything about the experience was pretty incredible. Spectacular hospitality, people wearing shirts that say, "How can I help?" You knew exactly who you could talk to. They gave this really nice first-time guest gift, a couple books and some other things. Everything about the experience was really, really strong, really good. But I'll tell you, the last thing they did in the service was a little off-putting to me as a guest. It wasn't like terribly off-putting, but Transformation Church is the name of the church. You are probably familiar with the old cartoon Transformers. In the show Transformers, the leader
More than
of
meets the eye.
There you go. The leader of the Autobots, Optimus Prime, had a sort of catchphrase when they go into battle. He'd say, "Transformers, roll out." So
roll out.
Yes, exactly. You have a good voice for that.
Yeah.
So at the end of the service, they said, "Are you ready, Transformation Church? Are you ready?" And I thought, ready for what? And then somebody pointed up and they said, "Transformers, roll out." Now, they didn't say humma-numma. I don't know what they were saying, because it was like this ritual that they did every Sunday. And for me, it was like the only thing you would have to do to make that something where an outsider could be a part of it, to say, "Friends, we have a little ritual. We end every service by pointing up and saying, we serve an awesome God. Pointing right, we go into the world. Whatever the thing is that they say. Are you ready, Transformation Church? Let's do it." And then you say all the stuff, or you put it on the screen so that people know what those things are, rather than leaving me feeling like an outsider at the very end, where you've done a great job all throughout. And then all of a sudden, you know, I'm an outsider and I don't know the secret language, the secret handshake, or any of that stuff.
Right.
So, you know, it's trying to identify those things. And you're right. You don't want to be cumbersome and explain every single thing that's happening and have a bunch of language that makes it feel like exposition the entire time. But there's little things we can do to include people.
Yeah. Man, I'm so glad that church didn't go like, roll out.
That would have been pretty cool. I might have liked that, but
Oh,
yeah.
that's hilarious. Okay, before we talk about AI in the church, pet peeve of mine, and maybe I'm totally wrong in this, but when it comes to guest gifts, I
Yes.
think one of the dumbest guest gifts is a T-shirt with your name on it,
Okay.
because they're not a fan yet. They don't
Yeah.
care. It's going to end up as a painting shirt. They're going to end up, it's going to be their PJs. They're not going to wear it out. They don't even know
Yeah.
whether they like you yet. You know, they don't know whether they're ready to commit yet. They don't
Right.
care about your logo. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter to them. Am I totally wrong in that? Because I think the better gift would be something that's either inspirational with your logo kind of in there, but not it.
Yeah.
You know, something interesting, something inspirational. But if it's going to be a T-shirt, but not necessarily a T-shirt with your big logo on it, they're
Yeah.
not ready for that, right? Am I
Yeah.
wrong? Am I crazy? Am I being finicky here?
I don't think you're wrong. I think that if you're going to give a shirt away, and this is what my church does, they have our tagline is better together. So they have a shirt that says better together, really huge on it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
that
on the
makes sense.
sleeve is the logo for the church, and it's like this big. It's tiny.
Yeah, yeah.
So I tell people all the time, your visitors don't love you yet.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it. So like the most common gift that I see when I'm out, and my wife actually has banned me from bringing any more home, are ceramic coffee mugs. And people buy the cheapest one. They get the white ceramic coffee mug with the one color logo on it.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, first of all, I think most of us have a cabinet in our homes that's already filled with too many coffee mugs, and we rotate the same 4 that are our favorites, and we don't even use the ones in the back.
Right.
Your church's coffee mug is going to mean more to your regulars than it is to a guest, because they don't care yet, right?
Right.
They don't even know if they're coming back, as you said. So I'm a big fan of trying to create a guest gift that would be meaningful and useful to a guest. So one of the best ones I ever saw was kind of a medium-sized church in Charlotte, North Carolina. They had this little bag that they gave out that they called a family night in a bag. They said, we value family. We want you to be a part of our family. We want to send you home today with a family night in a bag. And what it had in it was a little card that had a coupon for a free extra large 1-topping pizza from a local pizza place. Now, the brilliant thing about this was that if they didn't turn in the card, you weren't out anything.
Right.
The pizza place would just send a bill to the church once a month for any, pizza, and they'd give them a good deal on it. Yeah. It also had a bag of microwave popcorn in it. And then it had a coupon for a Redbox, gift code. So you could go and get a now Redbox is defunct now, but at the time that was pretty cool that I could go rent a movie, pop popcorn, have a pizza night with my family on the church. The suggestion I had for them is like, once I pop my popcorn and use my Redbox code, I don't have anything to remember you by.
Right.
What if you put a deck of cards with your church's logo on it with some family friendly card games that we could get those cards out and play every once in a while. But to me, that is a gift that's more about you than it is me. And I think too many churches are giving away a gift that's more about them. You are trying to make a first impression, but if it's just sort of a tchotchke with your logo on it, it doesn't really mean anything. One other one that I saw that was just very impressive to me was a church had a card, their Connect card for first-time guests, and they said, we want to donate $5 in your name to one of 4 charities locally here. So if you will pick which charity that you would like for us to donate to, then bring that by the Welcome Center. We also have a physical gift we'd like to give you, but we want to donate money in your name to a charity. And on the wall, they had these 4 plexiglass boxes that were filled with ping pong balls, and it was orange, the color of their church's logo. And they had the 4 charities listed, and the ping pong ball represented every time a guest had filled out a card, and it was filled with ping pong balls. And it showcased the ministry that they were doing in their community. So we got to see a physical representation. They also gave them a nice coffee mug, not a cheap one. But I thought that was a pretty cool thing because I do think there's some evidence to suggest that young people are like, why are you wasting money on these things when you could feed the hungry, or you could house the homeless, or
Right,
give
right,
clothing to people who don't have enough. The idea that you're going to give away $5, what you would have spent on a coffee mug in my name to a local charity, is a pretty cool thing. So
right,
um,
right.
my encouragement to your listeners is to think about, what could you do with your gift, your first time guest gift, to make it about them, and to make an impact, and not just give them a tchotchke that means
Right.
more to your regulars than your visitors.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. I love that. And I think even, if you have a church coffee shop, you give them a free coffee. If
Yeah.
you have a book, an inspiring book that you can get in bulk and cheap, and
Yep.
somehow imprint your name or put a sticker of your church on there that's a devotional or something to inspire or whatever. I definitely think things like that have more value because it's something that they'll keep. Like you said, a tchotchke, a pen, a T-shirt, a mug with your logo on it. They're not ready for that yet. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is you don't make that available to your church members who actually would,
That,
take that to work and show it off that, they're proud to
yeah.
be a part of your church. And so,
That's what I tell people all the time. We're sometimes so focused on the first time guest experience. We really ought to have a first time guest gift. And then we ought to have like the fifth time, or the
yeah,
you're committed now for a month, or
right,
whatever.
right.
We've seen you this many times. Hey, we've also got a T-shirt that has our logo on it, that now that you're a part of our community, we thought you might like some swag. It'd be nice to
Absolutely.
have something like that I'm now proud to wear around your logo. I will say this about shirts. I did visit Elevation Church a few years ago, and they did give me a shirt. And I'm already bought into the church, so I don't
Right.
mind. And they spend a little extra money. They give a nice multi-blend shirt that's not like the hard, chafy, cheap shirts that you would typically
Right,
get.
right. The
But
Hanes shirt.
here's what happens. Every time I wear that shirt out, many times that I wear that shirt out, people will say, "What's Elevation Church?" Because it says Elevation Church right on the front of it, and it's a nice design and all of that. And you sort of create walking billboards. But again, that's not. I agree again wholeheartedly with you that a first time visitor who's not yet bought in and doesn't even know if they're coming back, they're not going to wear your shirt around. Especially if it's not very well designed. If it's not
Right.
if the design isn't catchy and it's just your church's logo, it's likely going to be that painting shirt that you talked about, or a night
Right.
shirt that I wear to bed, or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be.
Well, and I think even with the example of Elevation Church is a brand name. Like
Yes.
it's known within church circles at least. And so, and plus the quality of the shirt was good. So there were two reasons you probably were confident and happy to wear that shirt,
Yeah.
because it was a church that had a good reputation, has good brand, is making an impact, and then also the quality of the shirt. And so you proudly wore it out there. But if it was a church you'd never heard of, you'd
Yeah.
probably be a little more hesitant in just wearing it out there. All right,
Yep.
so this has been amazing. This has been awesome. And we have talked about some stuff for some people is like incredible head smacks around the church experience. But I want to talk about your book, AI and the Church. And so how did that, what was your first experience with AI? What was your first reaction? You shared a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And when did that head smack moment happen for you around AI and the church? You
Yeah.
probably saw it as part of creativity and design and some of the other things that you were doing.
Right.
When did those two meet, and what was that like?
Well, the really interesting thing when I started to write the book is I was doing a little research on AI, and just the history of it. And the crazy thing is AI has been around for a very long time. We all probably know about ChatGPT, which was the revolutionary new technology that came out in November of 22, the chat bot that could chat like a real person. The first chat bot that was developed in the late 60s, called Eliza. And it was very simple, but you could, give it a query and it would come back, and it, didn't do a whole lot. But AI has been around for a really, really long time. So I was a huge fan growing up as a kid of anything having to do with AI, the way it was depicted. So I'm a big Star Wars fan. So R2D2 and C3PO, and And I used to watch a show in the 80s called Knight Rider. I don't know if you ever watched Knight
Oh,
Rider,
absolutely.
but
Kit and David
yeah,
Hasselhoff. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And
absolutely.
that seemed so far-fetched in the 90s that you could have a self-driving car that could talk to you, that had every
Yeah.
bit of information you could ever want at a query. You just asked it and it knew. We don't have jet engines that can fly over things and all that
Or
in our
missiles,
vehicles.
yeah.
Yeah, but we've arrived at that place, right?
Yeah.
So I've always been into technology, and in August of 22, OpenAI, which is the company that created ChatGPT, put out a new feature for an image generator that had been around for a while. The image generator is called DALL-E, which, by the way, for your listeners, if they've heard of DALL-E, they may not know that the name of DALL-E was inspired by Salvador Dali, the artist, and Wall-E, the robot. So it's DALL-E. That's where the name comes from.
Nice.
And so they had put out this new version of DALL-E, DALL-E 2, and it had a feature that had never been seen before called outpainting. And basically you could upload a photo, take a little box and put it next to the photo, and it would look at the photo, and then it would extend that photo beyond the frame, and it would do it in a way that was pretty like realistic to whatever already existed. So I took Mona Lisa. I just took a little, not even the whole picture, but just like a square Mona Lisa, put it in, drew a little box next to it and said mountain, sky, clouds. And it drew in everything, and it looked like the same brush strokes and the same colors. And my mouth dropped open. My heart started to beat a little bit faster. I started to sweat because I thought, did I just witness my extinction, as I mentioned a minute ago? And it scared me a little because I spent 30 years working on all these skills to be a designer and to create things like that. And the thought that I could just put words in and an image could appear that was pretty incredible. I could have done what DALL-E did, but it would have taken me a half a day to do it as well. So that initially kind of freaked me out. But then I got really excited about the church because in my coaching and consultation work, I work with some really small churches that don't have money. They could never even fathom hiring a guy like me. Yeah. And so the thought that a pastor could learn how to use this technology and talk to it. There's a really incredible study that they did back in 2008 that they continue to update. They continue to look at the data. This study found that we are 65% visual learners as a culture, and that learning increases by a whopping 400% when you use image to teach.
Wow.
So not every church has screens, but many churches do have screens. I think too often we treat the screen as if it's a giant piece of paper, and we take everything that used to be in the hymnal, the book we sing out of, everything that used to be in the Bible. We put lots of Bible verses on the screen and announcements. So we'll take the bulletin or the newsletter or whatever, and we'll put all that stuff on the screen. I don't think that's the way we ought to think of the screen. The screen is more of a canvas that we can paint new pictures. I'm not saying don't ever put text on it.
Right.
But if you really want to inspire people into remembering what they experienced on a Sunday morning or whatever day you worship, give them these visual touch points, because according to neuroscience, image is the native language of our brain. I'm more likely to remember if you give me a picture of what you're talking about versus just the text and the words that are there. So as I think about those two things, I think about the increase in effectiveness that we can have in the church. The Headsmack moment for me was that, gosh, now pastors, when they're telling that story, can bring it to life through image. I've had moments where when I'm working with a pastor, I've gone in search of the perfect stock photo to illustrate whatever they're talking about. And, you might spend a day looking for it and you might never find it, or you might find something that's sort of it. And maybe if I Photoshop this and this image, I can kind of make what you're describing in this story, but that's going to take a lot of time. Here's the crazy thing. Now we can say to a program like DALL-E or Midjourney or Ideogram, these are some of my favorite image generators, I can say, I want a picture of Paul on a horse riding through, snow-covered mountain meadow or whatever, and it can make it, and it looks
Right.
pretty incredible, and it's getting better at having 5 fingers instead of 6 or 8 or whatever. So that was kind of the moment for me where I saw the potential. And then the more I started to dig into what the technology could do, and once I discovered that there is a way to talk to it, and when you learn how to talk to it, you can get pretty consistent, good outputs. It really changed everything. And then I was like, I want to help the church navigate this moment in time, because while AI is a double-edged sword, there are lots of negatives and downsides. I think there's lots of positives. And so I think of AI as a tool that is neither inherently good nor inherently evil. It's how we use it that can be good or evil. And I tell people all the time, the only way to fail at AI right now is to ignore it. You don't have to love it. You don't even have to use it, but you do need to understand what it is and what it does, so that you can better be equipped for what's happening in the world around us.
Yeah. So you've mentioned, being able to generate images to use on the screens and on website, social media, things like that. What are some other ways that the AI and the church can merge?
Well, there's lots of them. In fact, there's one whole chapter where I have 10 different ways. That's just getting people started. In fact, if your listeners are interested, you can download that chapter for free at aiandthechurch.ai. You just fill out a little form, and it'll let you download it, and it'll give you these 10 ways. One of the ways that I really enjoy using it is for series development. So if you're brainstorming and you want to have it help you identify, like in the book, I actually have this demonstration where I said, I want to create a series based on Jesus' life, but I want to focus on his miracles. Can you help me brainstorm this? And it immediately comes up with 6 different miracles. And it's really important that we're doing the driving and that AI is not doing the driving. So I always say that it's a do it with you, not a do it for you. Right. And I think we have to remain in the driver's seat. If you're not careful, you can let AI do all of the wrestling with scripture. It ought to not be writing your sermon. It can help you write a better sermon. Yeah. But anyway, in that demonstration, I ask it for help with constructing the series. I always tell people, you're the decider. So right. You're a co-creator with Christ, not AI. Right. But Christ through you. For the skeptics out there who say, well, I just don't believe, I think this is the devil, or I think that God can't use this technology. Remember that God spoke through a burning bush. God spoke through Balaam's donkey. God spoke through a disembodied hand that wrote a message on the wall, right? God says that God will speak through the very stones themselves if we don't do our work. So why would we believe that God couldn't arrange the bits and the bytes and all the stuff within this technology to speak to humanity as well? But anyway, back to the series design. You can use it to help you pick out songs. You can use it to help you with branding. So in the demonstration, I asked it to help me write a bumper video, and then to provide all of the descriptions for the images and voiceover for the narrator. And then I used other technologies to generate the images and the voiceover. And then I put together this whole bumper video that really was about 65% AI creating the various things, and then me adding my own touches to that. This is something that would have taken me probably about 80 hours. Wow. The old-fashioned way. And now I could probably do it in about 5. Which is really incredible. So I tell pastors all the time, like, it can save you time. It can help you sharpen your content. It can give you ideas. It can get you outside of your own head. Sometimes we get stuck on our own point of view and perspective. So one of the ways is series design. Another way is to analyze your data. So you can take your attendance data or whatever, put it all into ChatGPT, and then chat with your data. Which Sunday of the month over the last 3 years is the best attended Sunday, or out of the potentially 5 Sundays that occur in a month, which Sunday is the best attended? What if you discovered through chatting with your data that the 3rd Sunday always is the best attended Sunday? Maybe we shouldn't start series on the 1st Sunday of the month like we might typically do, But maybe because we've got the most people there on the third Sunday, maybe we ought to use that data to inform what we're doing with how we plan worship. Another way is translation. There's a software that is just completely incredible that I can deliver a message in English. It can then take that message using my voice, cloning my voice, turn it into Spanish or French or another language, and then even like deep fake my mouth to move in a very convincing way that I'm speaking it. Now, I don't think we want to fool people into thinking, wow, Jason learned Spanish overnight. But I could very easily say, through the power of AI, I want you to hear this message in your own native language. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking folks in our congregation. So today, let me read the scripture for you in English, and then you're going to hear it in Spanish. And it can be in my voice with my face for both of those things. So, but disclosing that AI was used.
Right. Having that transparency. Yeah.
Yeah. Bible reading plans. You know, if you want to give people a 10-week study, of course you can do that the old-fashioned way and spend a day or more, you know, looking up all the scripture and cross-referencing and all that kind of stuff. Or you can spend 5 minutes having a conversation with ChatGPT and saying, this is the subject that I'm talking about. Can you help me find, you know, 10 scriptures that go with this? And can you write some reflection questions? And again, you're doing the driving, but it's really good at that kind of thing. There are just so many ways to bridge our conversation from earlier. If you're trying to get into the head of an outsider, somebody who doesn't know anything about your church, have a conversation with ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, one of the chatbots, to say, I'm putting together this series. How would somebody that didn't grow up in the church, what might some of their responses be, or how would they need to hear this? One of my favorite ways to use it in sermon development is to ask ChatGPT to be a foil to your ideas. So I want you to take on the opposite perspective.
Wow.
I'm preaching on tithing or stewardship. Can you take on the role of a skeptic who thinks the church is always asking for too much money? And then it's going to help give it your whole sermon. It's going to come back and say, in your first point, you lost me here when you might consider, and it's going to help you take in a whole new perspective, which I think can help you clarify and sharpen your content. It shouldn't write your sermon for you, but it can help you to take that sermon and make it more accessible. So I could go on and on and on. There are just so many ways you can use it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the key is also to trust but verify too.
Yes.
Because you know, it as much as we like to think that AI is totally unbiased, untainted by human preferences and bents and you know, all of that stuff, we do need to just double check it. Just read through it. Don't be ignorant, and don't just think, hey, done, you know, I'm off to play golf, you know, but actually take time to read through the stuff that it outputs and verify it. Because, you know, it's not 100% pure.
Yes.
If I could put it that way.
I actually make that advice, that very phrase I put in the book, that we have to trust but verify. A lot of folks don't know this technical term, but it is actually a technical term, and it's hallucination. That's the technical term for when AI makes stuff up or is inaccurate. The reason that happens is that these chatbots were trained on sort of a reward system. Like when they're training it, you answer the question right, you get a reward, you know, and I don't know exactly how that works technically, but it basically
get a little extra jolt of electricity.
Yeah, there you go. We pump in a few extra. And so it really wants, and it doesn't have a will, but it's programmed to get that little reward. It wants to do the right thing. It wants to provide you the answer. So sometimes it will actually make up an answer that it doesn't have because it wants that little jolt of whatever. Again, it's not sentient. Doesn't have an agenda or anything like that. But the programming, the algorithms, are looking to get it right. In the book, I write about a few different instances where this has been real problematic. One Texas lawyer actually argued a case that he used ChatGPT to prepare for, and it cited fake case law that he brought into the court. He didn't trust, or he trusted it, but he didn't verify. and ended up getting into a lot of trouble around that.
Wow.
And there's some other instances where that's happened. I had a pastor that I was working with who was using an earlier version of ChatGPT, had it make up some scripture. Like, he's like, I really like this scripture, and I went to look for it and I couldn't find it. And it turns out it made it up, you know?
Wow.
So you do have to be careful about what you're using from it. It's gotten better and better as time has gone on, but you're so right about the bias issue. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, it is not biased, but it did train on data that human beings created, and human beings are biased.
Right.
So that is true with chatbots, but it's also true with image generators. Two of the things that I wrote about in the book, one was that I do these AI cohorts where over 6 months, I lead a process where each month we talk about different aspects of AI, and I kind of help pastors learn, and other leaders learn, how to use AI, kind of a primer on AI. And in promoting it, I typed into DALL-E, which is an image generator, create a Far Side style cartoon of a pastor in the pastor's office, considering signing up for an AI cohort. And it generated this image of a kind of a middle-aged male, slightly graying hair on the side, ended up having like a priest collar and all of that. Didn't give it any thought, just posted it on Facebook and said, hey, sign up for my AI cohort. Now, I know that we probably have a lot of different types of listeners, and some folks probably have a different theological perspective on female pastors. I'm in the United Methodist Church, where that's a pretty common thing. I'm supportive of women pastors in ministry, but I know that's not true for all of your listeners. I posted that, and of course, some of my women clergy friends were like, so that's what a pastor looks like? And I was like, I just let AI do the driving. And they're like, this is the problem with AI. It's biased. I'm like, no, I just wasn't thoughtful enough in the way that I prompted it. So then I immediately went and I prompted African-American female pastor, and older aged male pastor, and Hispanic, so then I generated like 4 or 5 images and I uploaded them, and it was a great learning moment for me that I have to prompt around the biases that are there.
Right.
There's one other demonstration I did in the book where I said, and you can see all these pictures in the book. I said, give me an image of Jesus standing by the Sea of Galilee midday. And of course, when I just say Jesus by the Sea of Galilee midday, I get a European or white looking guy, maybe looks like he's from Alabama, and he's got a mullet, and his skin is very much like mine and all of that.
Right.
But then I found that if I said, give me an African-American Jesus by the Sea of Galilee, it would do that. Or if I said, give me a Hispanic or a Korean, and here's a novel idea. What if we said a Middle Eastern Jesus? And it created somebody that looked like they were from the region that Jesus grew up in,
Right.
My favorite way, though, to represent Jesus is silhouette. Because then you can imagine what Jesus looks like, rather than creating Jesus in our likeness. You can kind of, imagine what Jesus might have looked like. So I prompted a silhouette of Jesus by the Sea of Galilee, and it can do that. So we do have to be mindful of the biases. I will just say that the 3 principles that will sometimes drive what I'm doing when I think about AI are really John Wesley's principles. John Wesley talked about do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. Those 3 things. I think those can guide us very wisely. Do no harm. So let's make sure that we're being intentional about the way we prompt, so that we're including all sorts of people in the way that we represent Jesus, and in our photography and all of those kinds of things. Get inside the minds of other people that you might not think about very often when you're writing a sermon and so on. Do as much good as we can. I think being able to translate our message into other languages and deliver that in a compelling way does lots of good. I think that when you brainstorm with ChatGPT, it'll give you ideas for ministries and fundraisers and ways to reach people that maybe you hadn't thought of. And the last one, to me, is the most important one of all, and that is stay in love with God. And we've got to be careful, because this technology is so good that I could see pastors and leaders unintentionally really kind of treating AI as a proxy Holy Spirit, that I'm not wrestling with the text. I'm going to Chat GPT and saying, I'm preaching on this. What should I take from it?
Right.
And rather than you doing the soul work to say how to, in the human experience, with the human condition present in this moment, how do I respond to this rather than letting ChatGPT do all of that work? I will say that I had one day that I was writing, and I disclose in the book that I used ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini. I felt like if I'm writing a book about this, I want to use the technology so I know how to advise people. And people often say, oh, so ChatGPT just wrote your book for you. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
I would guesstimate that, maybe 40% of what's there might have been there in outline form, or I used it for research or whatever. It doesn't do it for you.
Right.
But anyway, in going back and forth with ChatGPT, there was a day that I logged into ChatGPT and the screen was blank. And all of my previous stuff was gone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and I went to another browser and I opened it and it's gone. Then I went to my phone and I'm like, oh, ChatGPT is just down today or right now.
Yeah.
So here's what I did. I closed my laptop and I said, well, I can't write today because ChatGPT is down. And then I had this serious gut check and I'm like, this is the 14th book I've written. I did not need ChatGPT for the first 13 books. Am I already too addicted to this technology and what it can do for me? And I opened my laptop back up. And even when ChatGPT came back, I didn't use it for a day because I thought, I don't want to be
I'm not going to become a slave to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we have to do is my mantra is embrace the technology, but restrain the way that you use it.
Right.
Do not give up your agency to AI. And if you're not careful, your spiritual muscles will become so atrophied that you won't be able to do much of anything in the future if you rely on AI for everything. I talk about that scene in the movie WALL-E, where all of the passengers on the Axiom who float around on carts and have AI deliver food and clothing and all that, take them around the ship for quote recreation. When they get back to Earth, they can't walk anymore because they haven't had to do anything for so long, and they floated around on carts and AI's done all the stuff. If we're not careful, we're going to end up in the same place. So I love what it can do for us, but I also think we've got to be really careful about how far we go with it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we can augment and not replace,
Yes.
And so I think we can definitely augment things that we're doing, make them better, faster, smarter, but not replace the human element, not replace the Holy Spirit, not replace study and wrestling and all of that. But we can definitely augment and even speed up and even supplement and add to it and all of that stuff, but not replace some of the wrestling that we need to do. There's probably tons more that you can share from your book, and I encourage everybody to check it out. And I'll have a link in the show notes for it. I definitely encourage you to get a copy of it, read through it, wrestle with ways that you could possibly use it, and then implement it and try it out. So what are you mentioned? ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. Are those the three? If somebody was like, okay, I'm ready to give it a shot, I've kind of hesitated, now I'm ready to do it. Are those the three that you recommend people diving into?
Well, I often ChatGPT tends to be my default. Part of it is that it came out first, but I've had enough time with it that I really love what it can do. I will mention that there's another app called Magi, Magai, who was written by a friend of mine. He is a former youth pastor, worked at a church and all that. Not necessarily a church app, but just to know that he has some background there. What I really love about Magi is that it incorporates about 25 different AI tools in it, including ChatGPT and Claude and all those things. It includes several image generators, some video generators. And so for less than you would spend on a professional ChatGPT subscription, you can get a Magi. And in fact, Dustin, who wrote the app, gave me a code that people can use if they want to get 30% off to try it out.
Awesome. Yeah.
It's Wineskin30. I think of this as a new wineskin opportunity. So if you put in Wineskin30, you will save 30% off of a subscription. You can just try it for a month if you want. But what's really neat is I can actually have Claude talk to ChatGPT and Grok and all of Gemini, all of the different chatbots, because I can begin a conversation with one and then switch in the same conversation, and it doesn't really know that I've switched. So why would you do that? ChatGPT is sort of, again, a more kind of boilerplate style of chatbot, but Claude tends to be a little more straight and narrow. It's a little less creative, but it tends to hallucinate less. So I might do some brainstorming with ChatGPT and then switch the conversation to Claude. I mean, you could do this by copying and pasting out of ChatGPT and then going over to Claude and all that. But Magi kind of does all that for you. Grok is X or Twitter. It's their chatbot, and it tends to have a little bit more of a hipster, attitude vibe. So it's got a different personality. So each chatbot kind of has its own strengths and weaknesses and all that. I would say if you're just trying to get started, though, ChatGPT would be the place that I might suggest that you go. There's a free version of it that's really, really powerful. And then for $20 a month, you can get a professional version, which gives you some additional tools and the ability to generate images. So I guess that's where I would start. But again, you get a lot of bang for your buck with Magi, and you get all of those different tools. I think there's 25 or more tools that are built into it.
And the URL again?
You can go to, hold on, give me 1 second here. I think it's Magi, Magi sign up, I think. He gave me a link.
Yeah, I could just put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's cool.
I should have that memorized, but
that's all right. So as we wrap this up, and I do recommend you get his book. Where's the best place to get your book, Jason?
If you go to AIinthechurch.ai, that will give you an opportunity to click on a buy link, which just takes you over to Amazon. But it's easy to remember, AIinthechurch.ai. And again, you can get that free chapter if you want to download that to learn 10 different ways that you can use AI in the church.
Awesome. So a final head smack that you'd like to share, something I didn't ask you, or something that you just really feel would be an incredible head smack for somebody as we wrap this up?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that we are 6 or 8 months away from video being completely possible in a convincing way, which is both scary and not scary at the same time. Right now, you can kind of tell AI generated video is AI generated video. But I think the head smack is that in maybe 8 to 10 months, something like that, we're going to be able to do things that we can't even imagine right now. And the upside of that is that imagine what you'll be able to do to tell biblical stories, to bring illustrations to life. Of course, the other side of that is that people will be able to make the president say whatever they want to make the president say or do. Right. It can be used in nefarious ways as well. I wrote about it in the book. Tyler Perry was going to build a brand new studio. And when he saw the pre-release version of a new resource that's coming soon called Sora, he decided not to build his studio because he said AI is going to be good enough in the future. We don't need these buildings and lights and cameras and all that kind of stuff. We're going to be able to generate things in the computer. So I just think the idea that you could create your own version of The Chosen is a pretty cool thing if you're thinking about, like, how do I create a really great, sermon? So the head smack, I think, for me is just that the things that I wanted to do as a kid, as a third grader, thinking I want to grow up and be an artist, I'll be able to achieve now from my laptop in my living room, which is a crazy thought.
That is a crazy thought, and it's an incredible thought. And so thank you so much for this conversation. Like I said, I encourage you to get his book. Even The Secret Worshipper is a great resource for somebody to come to your church and just come and visit and give you some great, honest feedback about what their experience is like, and that can change your church. But also, don't be afraid of AI. Let it augment what you're doing, and you'll find that it'll help you to do things faster, better, smarter, and make your ministry a whole lot better. Jason, thank you so much, man. This has been great.
Paul, I have really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care, man.